All right, we're back. This is part of being live. We experienced some technical difficulties, but let me try to bring Jia back on here. I think there was an issue with connection or something. Uh, but right as we're getting into the good stuff, so let me see if I can bring Jia back on here. The internet is fun, guys.
Hi
We're
again.
back. I don't know what happened. This just shows how neither of us know how to work Instagram Live. But I was saying thank you for being on here and for getting ready. Like, for me, once a week doing my hair is a really big deal.
I tweeted at you. I put on a real bra for the first time in
I
36 days, and
I loved that.
it feels. You know what? It feels good to put on a bra again.
It does feel good. I mean, my thing is I like get ready waist up. Other than that, like I'm in sweats. I'm not.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've got my slippers on right now.
Oh my god, I've been living in slippers too.
Yeah.
Okay, so Trick Mirror was your first book, right?
Yeah.
First book. How long did it take you to write it?
It took me. I wanted to write it. I started writing it in the summer of 2017. Finished it in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to write. I think I wrote it a little too fast. If I could go back, I would. I don't know. I didn't take any. I work at the New Yorker. I would have taken time off work to do it. But there was also.
Oh my god, you wrote the book while having a full-time job?
Yeah, there's something about, I feel I have this real like millennial. I graduated in the middle of the last recession, and I was just like, I was always like, I have to work every. I mean, it's part of this whole capitalist thing that I talk about in the book. This sense that if you're not producing, if you're not working, I was always like, if I stop working for a single second, I'm going to lose my health insurance, and then like my whole life is going to crumble.
There's such like a pressure now for everyone. I feel like because all you see are people being successful everywhere. Yeah. That millennials especially are like, if they take a day off, they feel like they're not doing anything with their lives.
And there's something about all of like the way social media, even like Instagram itself, I mean, it turns living life into a form of work. There's a way in which all these systems are set up to, increasingly monetize every last second of our, it's like, got a spare room, rent it on Airbnb, like have 20 minutes, drive for Uber. Like I fall prey to that mindset, and I was trying to get out of it. But there was also, the book is kind of about like now, it's about the culture we live in right now. And with a book like that, I was sort of like, you might as well, I wanted it to come out when it still felt kind of plausibly relevant and not like writing about like 5 years before.
Well, no, especially with social media, things are changing constantly. I feel like, even 2 years ago, 3 years ago, things were very different. So I feel like the fact that you captured the essence still of now is very impressive with how quickly things tend to move on social media.
Don't you feel like even February was another era?
I mean, I feel like we've been in quarantine for years. It's been like a month.
I know.
But yeah, no, I mean, just even like the different social media platforms that are kind of submerging out of this are so wild to me. I feel like I'm behind of the times, and I'm very much, the generation that is social media.
So. Yeah, you have to be telling me what's actually going on right now.
I have clearly no idea. So why did you choose essays rather than writing a whole book?
Well, I wanted to I feel like it's really important to give an idea the right amount of space. And with these ideas, like each essay was kind of based around a question. Like the first essay is about the internet. And the question was like, 15 years ago, the internet seemed like it was only amazing and full of promise. And then suddenly now we all kind of know that the internet is rotting our brains a little bit. And it was like, why did the internet go from being bad to good? Like each of the essays was one question. And I was sort of like, these are questions that I could try to stretch. Like you could probably write a kind of bad book about each one of these questions.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, but I like the essay form. I got my start writing online. Most of us, we do a lot of reading online. And this was the first time I'd ever, in writing a book, I was like, okay, I want it to be a worthwhile object. I want it to have the sort of liveliness that we kind of expect from, the internet, but
Yeah, like
also
that constantly updating and changing. Our attention spans are so short now, I think.
yeah, because my brain is trained on that too. But
Mm-hmm.
with the thing that I love about books, right, is that, you know, when we stare at screens all day, when you're actually reading a book, it recalibrates your attention. You can really
Mm-hmm.
focus on things in a way that I personally can't reading on a screen. And
No, no.
so yeah, so I wanted to, and I like the essay form, you know, like I like it as a way of being like, I'm not even going to try to answer these questions, but I'm going to see how you could even try to answer the question. Like, I'm not going to present you with an answer, but I like
Like
the way
show
that,
your thought process kind of
yeah, just
you
walk
work
you
for them.
through. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it feels super authentic as well. I think when you're reading it, I feel like I'm like answering the question along with you and kind of like understanding how you got to those conclusions. But you say this super interesting thing in the book about how in our lives we kind of have like a backstage, you know, when something happens and then we all go collect somewhere with your friends to talk about it or you go home, and how you say the internet doesn't have a backstage. And I
Yeah.
found that so interesting because you're so right. Like there is nowhere to hide on the internet.
Yeah, well, and I wonder how you feel about this as someone that's been in the public eye for a long time. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like I think one thing that's interesting about the internet is that the sort of mechanisms that used to only surround celebrity, it sort of systematizes for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea that, you know, strangers could know about your life, that you could, you know, the intimate details about you could be known to like an indefinitely increasing number of people.
Mm-hmm.
That you know, that used to be a way of life that's really particular to like the ultra famous, but now it's the like economic model of all these social media platforms.
Yeah.
And I think you know, like there's a thrill in that, but there's also a constriction, right? Like
Absolutely.
and
Well,
and
it's like
like
there's certain
yeah,
things you wouldn't do, you know, in front of an audience of a million people that
yeah,
suddenly the internet gives you like the bravery or you know, I'm like awful at public speaking and I would never, but like suddenly when you're just talking to your phone in your room, it becomes a little bit less scary and a little less
yeah.
intimidating. And I think that's like the internet almost gives you this false sense of security because it is very intimate, but then you think about actually the amount of people on the internet and it suddenly is a lot less intimate.
Yeah, and it's like I think again, like there are parts of that are kind of amazing, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
I think the internet, the way it's made it so easy for anyone to communicate with anyone, it's meant that, you know, the last 10 years, all of a sudden, like there's been like the internet, the diversity of voices you hear on the internet, and you know, like suddenly we're hearing from people that you wouldn't have heard from before.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something, but like the thing about being able to speak to an indefinitely increasing audience at all times is that
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, we're in natural human life, you know, we're one way we're with when we're with our boss, we're one way when we're with our mom, like, and with the
Mm-hmm.
internet it's like you have to be all things to like, you know, the incentive is that you should kind of be pleasing to anyone at
And
any time.
everyone, and that's impossible.
It's
And I
impossible.
think
Yeah,
that's like this the probably the most toxic part of the internet is like that idea of being able to please everyone, even everyone in a workspace, let alone, you know, the world is just impossible because it's like so subjective. And then you're kind of putting yourself in this position of trying to do that. And you also talk about how in life, like you can just walk around and you're still visible, you're being seen. On the internet, to be seen, you have to act, you have to do something. And I
yeah.
think it gives people, especially young people, a lot of pressure to like do something crazy just to get recognized or noticed, you know, rather because it's not enough to just be.
Yeah, and I think you know, we're seeing in quarantine how much we miss how what it's like to be in each other's physical presence
Mm-hmm.
and not need to take like to be seen in kind of the natural way, right? To
Yeah.
be like to not need to just yeah, because like it's a natural thing to want to be seen and to want to be recognized, but the internet makes you actively perform to need to do it.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about the whole, I mean, I'm genuinely curious, like having been in the public eye, you
Mm-hmm.
know, since you were young, like what that, and you know, there's no, especially for young women, that is the kind of expectation that you be pleasing to whoever's looking at you at any moment. How have you navigated that?
You know, it's tough because in a lot of ways I think, you know, it's important to establish who you are outside of the internet. And
Absolutely.
I'm very grateful because I think I was actually one of the last generations to be able to do that. Like I didn't have Instagram until I was 14.
Yeah.
But I was like one of the first. I was probably I call myself the test dummies for Instagram and things like that. And I think I will say the really amazing thing is we have this ability to kind of tell your own story in a way that we didn't before, especially as a model. Being able to have a platform to like share your voice and ask yourself the questions that maybe people aren't asking you,
Yeah.
I find to be really amazing. You know,
Yeah.
like I don't get asked about what I'm reading in interviews naturally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I want people to, and so I was like,
Yeah.
you know what, I'm gonna ask myself what I'm reading, and you
Yeah,
know,
that's cool.
whoever wants to hear can hear things like that. I just think being able to, when I realized I could control the narrative, I found a new appreciation for I think what social media means to
Yeah.
young women especially.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like it has definitely, I mean, I think that the sort of economic structure of the internet is kind of monstrous. I think it's,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a structure of surveillance and monetization that I find,
Mm-hmm.
you know, really destructive. At the same time, I definitely only have a career because of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like for writers that don't come from, you know, like particularly connected or, you know, traditional backgrounds for,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like it's been a reason that a lot of people who don't look like what you would expect from like a, you know, some like highbrow fucking magazine or whatever have been able, you know, I don't think I would have I certainly wouldn't have the job I have without the internet. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think that it's important to acknowledge that,
Yeah.
like I would never bite the hand that feeds me, and I think like
Yeah.
there's no shame in giving a nod to the internet for what it's done for everyone, but I also
Yeah.
think it's super important to also notice the places where it can be, you know, bad for
Yeah.
us, and like I think the pressure it puts on millennials to, you know, feel like they're doing something incredible to, you know, live a life that's worth living. I think that that can get super tricky because, you know, there's like you talk about in the book how people would like grow up and they wanted to be doctors and lawyers, things like that. Suddenly, like those aren't the answers we're getting from even 6, 7-year-old kids because they grow up with YouTube and with Instagram.
Gonna be
And
TikTok stars, baby.
yeah. And like that's the new thing that people are like aspiring to be. So I just think it shifts and like all these jobs, you know, like doctors right now, it's so important. And I think sometimes Instagram can kind of like, because those might not always be the people being recognized on the internet, it can kind of, you know, lead us astray and thinking about like stuff that actually matters.
Yeah.
But
The
I
one
also
thing that's
think
been,
right now it's good for like
yeah.
things that are going on with COVID-19 because we are recognizing and giving those people, you know, the recognition that they deserve.
Yeah. And like, I think, it's interesting of all of the things that this era is clarifying, you know, like I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's all of the things that it's highlighting. One kind of amazing thing about it is that, you know, yeah, the internet doesn't typically show the lives of like working class people, or it doesn't typically, or the media even, right? The
Mm-hmm.
media is terrible at covering these things. But in the last month, like I think it's been really clear to all of us that like people who the internet has made it, um, the internet has given us sort of a direct line to what it's like to be, you know, a Whole Foods worker who's like not
Mm-hmm.
making enough money and getting screwed over, right? Or like, you know, someone in a hospital without enough PPE. There's the directness of that communication is really wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of telling those people stories, giving them a platform.
Yeah.
Um, has the evolution of the internet kind of this idea of growing up as the internet also kind of expands and evolves, has that always been pretty, you know, important in the things that you were writing?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, as I think that the internet, for better or worse, it is the biggest change of this era, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's changed every system. It's become this sort of central nervous system in our society through which everything, I mean, you write a story about politics, you write a story about health, you write a story about anything, and it passes through the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just this this unavoidable centrality to it that seems like it, you know, every story is in a way an internet story,
Mm-hmm.
like no matter what. And there's also, I think I am just fundamentally really interested in the way that the internet takes all of these old natural social impulses, right, like we were talking about, to be liked by other people, which is a natural and like good impulse, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to be seen, to be recognized as who we are, to express ourselves, whatever. it it takes all of these behaviors and monetizes them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that is my fundamental interest in it. Like what this ecosystem is like that suddenly monetizes every last inch of human life is fascinating to me.
Yeah, and you bring up a really valid point in your book where you were like, the internet used to kind of reflect and talk about the things that were happening in our lives. Then you say now it's like the internet almost dictates then what happens in our lives.
Yeah.
And that's so right. And I think now more than ever, it's like the internet plays such a big role in what's happening in the world, you know, in even politics. And
oh yeah. I mean, the internet determined the last election. It will determine all of the elections to come. Like it's
so
wild.
crazy.
Like
it's
little
so
Facebook
crazy.
policies on what is allowed and what is not is like hugely politically determinative. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have a funny question. Do you remember your first ever screen name that you had?
Oh, girl, it's so embarrassing.
Tell
so
us.
I think I was like, this is literally like, I was in 3rd grade or something, and we had gotten like AOL, and it's like, you know, we'd put the little CD in, and it would like, it was on dial-up internet. I mean, the thing it's so funny that it's like, you know, I'm 12 years older than you or something, and it feels like it just this massive like
well, that's what's wild. Even like
difference.
I see, you know, 16-year-olds, and I'm only 18, but who know how to work TikTok in a way that I would never. I just like throw my hands up to them, and
I call it grandpa syndrome. It's because like technology changes so quickly that we're all like in my day, but it's like we're still like
I know
like but it was it actually, it's fitting for this book club theme. It was Books with a Z 88.
That's not a bad one at all. I think that's pretty
I don't know. Books with a Z.
I mean, I don't even know.
You never had, did you have embarrassing screen names? That was before.
No, I was super late also to be on social media because it terrified me. Like, I'm very grateful also that now there's like 10-year-olds on Instagram. My 10-year-old self was not. I'm very happy I was able to like grow up and mature before I kind of like got on social media. And still, you know, I was 14, 15 when I got on Instagram finally. That was my first form of social media. And I still look back and I'm like, you know, this idea that you talk about in the book of having to constantly face who we were. There's like a permanent record of every moment of our life that just didn't exist before, and you cannot run from your past now. You just absolutely cannot.
Well, and one thing that I think is interesting about that, well, are your 14-year-old Instagrams still on your, like if
I think there are some. I think there are some.
Yeah.
Although I have archived a few, I won't lie.
Yeah, you go back and you delete the ones with like really bad filters.
Nope. Oh my gosh.
Oh, you know,
the collages.
I'll tell you a funny story. Like so I actually, in 2010, I spent a year off the internet because I was in the Peace Corps. And so I was like in the middle of nowhere, in the mountains, no internet. Like in a lot of ways, like quarantine has been, it's like this, but this is way chiller. Like all my Peace Corps friends are like, I can take a hot shower. I don't have to take a shit outside. Like, this is great. And like, I have the internet. This is amazing. But I came back and Instagram had happened and I was like 22 and I was like, okay, like I thought that this was a private app where you could like add interesting filters. And so I like took a nude and put it on Insta because I like thought it was
you didn't
like just for me, you know, like I thought it was like just like cool filters. And then I had been like in public for like a month and I was like,
and you had no idea.
I had no idea. I mean, no one followed me. I didn't follow anyone, but it was still like, oh my.
Well, no, that's why the internet is so scary, is even something like that might, you know, carry no significance in the moment can come back and bite you in the ass later.
Thank God I know. Well, it's funny. I think one thing that the internet, like that aspect of it that you were just talking about, that like you could get on the internet when you're 14 and, you know, presumably like sometimes when I'm looking at Twitter, especially, I'm like, are we going to be doing this till we die? You know?
I know. Well, I mean, the amount that social media has changed even from when I got on it, I just wonder where it can go or where there's left to go. It seems like it's at such an extreme, but then it constantly is proving, you know, that we can take it farther and farther.
Right. Like, you know, in 5 years, there'll be like a massive venture capitalized, like, you know, subscription service that shows like 2-second videos, you know?
I know. I'm also like, how could my attention span is pretty short, but, you know, even I have trouble keeping up. Like when Vine happened, it was like 7 seconds, I think. Yeah. I was like, how do you fit something into 7 seconds? Like, I
But
didn't.
Vine was so good.
Oh, Vine was so good. I miss
Vine
Vine.
was the good one. Yeah.
I miss
Vine is like,
Vine.
I've got nothing bad to say about Vine.
Rest
But
in
no,
peace to Vine.
but like there's this aspect too. So the internet rewards, like I think it's important to pay attention to what the internet rewards and why. And one of the things that the internet rewards is like, you know, like we were saying earlier, this sort of brand, you know, like this branded quality of being as appealing to as many people at any given time, which is not like a natural thing for human personality to need to do. And there's a way in which it encourages this, almost demands this sort of consistency, right? Like you have to, I think it, I think there's this, it can give people this subconscious feeling that if they had an opinion, that's got to be it, you know, like they can't change, they can't be wrong, they can't fuck up. And it's like that's completely antithetical to what it's like to be a human, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it used to also be, you know, if you did something stupid at a high school party, people at your high school might talk about it for a week and that was it. And now there's this immense pressure for kids, you know, even just applying to college where all of this stuff is completely accessible for everyone. And you no longer have the space, which I think is a really good thing in a lot of ways. It like kind of eliminates the amount of space you have to mess up, but it also can be scary because
No, that's bad.
you're naturally supposed to mess up when you're especially young.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
suddenly you can't do that.
Well, how have your like, I mean, how do people, I truly always think this, like if God, like if I had, I mean, I had Facebook my senior, right after I graduated from high school, but you know, if I had even just a smartphone in high school, like it would have been dark. Like,
Yeah. No, I mean, I was always so paranoid because I realized like my biggest thing was I always wanted to go to Columbia when I was younger. Like that was just my dream. I haven't gone yet, but who's to say?
yeah.
But I just, even at, you know, you'd be at a high school party or whatever, I was always so careful. And it kind of like implants this sort of awareness in your head, you know, of a phone because, you know, you don't need to see a camera now to have a picture taken of you.
Right.
And that's true for everyone. It doesn't mean like you don't even have to be in the public eye to be messed up by something like that or have that, you know, interfere with your life. And I think kids now are just always aware of phones and cameras being on them at all times.
But there's one thing, like I feel like people your age, like you guys, you know, you pioneered like the Finsta. Like there's something like I think the people my age, I think there's this, like we've had to learn in like as we were adults that the internet has all of these kind of conflicting and often bad incentives working on us, but I feel like, you know, people who are more native to it, you're like, yeah, like you need like that's what the Finsta is. It's the backstage basically.
I think for sort of like the second generation of people going into social media, like I think at first it was very exciting and people were seeking that kind of public attention, and I almost feel like then, you know, the second round of people that kind of got into social media, at least I can speak for myself, were almost seeking that privacy. And it is interesting the way social media can kind of, in a lot of ways, you know, it makes people want attention, but in a lot of other ways it makes you really appreciate the private moments and the quiet time, at least, you know, for me and for yourself. Like you start to appreciate the times when you're not being monitored and not everything you say is, you know, being seen by lots of people. And you say something super interesting in your book just about being a woman in the media. And I mean, that whole essay is just so genius to me. But I think when you talk about like the fact that women are able to be flawed now in the media so that hopefully then someone else can see that woman and say, okay, so it's okay for me to have issues too. And I think that's so important because that sort of pressure to be especially a woman in the media, and not only do you have to say and do the right thing, but you also have to dress right and look right. And I mean, there's all these pressures that men, I don't think, have in media now. For a woman, even, you know, an author, a politician, whatever, to act a certain way online.
Oh yeah, like the amount of scrutiny that like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez gets on every single move she ever makes, and it's like, please,
yeah. And when it became okay, and I think, I mean, it was always okay, but now it's just in a much larger scale to comment on a woman's appearance when you're talking about something that should have nothing to do with the shirt that she's wearing or her makeup.
Yeah.
And I think that's where social media really comes in, because suddenly it really tends to like dilute the actual conversation and focus on, you know, what her hair looks like.
Yeah.
And that can be a really dangerous thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And when you were growing up and with the age of social media, who were some of those women that were super like prevalent then that were kind of starting to, you know, you talk about like Gwyneth Paltrow and Winona Ryder, people like that. Who were the women that like kind of helped to navigate that for you?
Well, you know, honestly, someone that I've been thinking about a lot recently. So one thing that I think one of the things that I've always been aware of since I was little was that life, and I think maybe this is why I'm so interested in internet mechanisms, is that I never really took the lives and the narratives that were being mapped onto celebrities. I was like, we can't, I'm not going to understand the world through what's happening to them, because they're living under these conditions that are not particular to normal life necessarily, but now they are because of the internet. But I've been thinking about Fiona Apple a lot this week because of her new album.
Love.
And yeah, it's
Thank God for Fiona Apple right now. Truly.
It is so, so good. And you know, it's funny. It's like I was thinking, I'm so grateful. I listened to her a lot when I was 11 years old. I listened to her when I was 25. I'm still listening to her. It's amazing. But I think, you know, honestly, like there was nothing more formative maybe than like being in high school during the early 2000s, like the real sort of tabloid, you know, like Britney Spears upskirt like era, and being like, this is a nightmare. This is a nightmare out here.
Terrifying.
You know, like the whole like late 90s, like teen stars getting hot, you know, the sort of really bland, kind of like Paris Hilton era of tabloid celebrity. It was a lot for me. But I think like, I mean, but one of the things that I was thinking about with that, like you got a flip side to it too, right? Like that's another thing in that essay where, you know, there's so much shit that we need to defend women against that, you know, it then becomes possible to be like, anything a woman does, it's like, you know, we shouldn't criticize her. She's just a strong woman. Yeah. Which has, you know, been applied to like Elizabeth Holmes and like the, you know, like Melania Trump, right? Like, like I remember
where it's like any criticism of a woman can be turned into being anti-feminist.
Yeah. And that's a real defense mechanism where it shouldn't be, right? Like I always remember like when Melania Trump was wearing that, you know, like that I really don't care, do you jacket when she was like going to visit the kids at the border, and they were, and the White House was like, you shouldn't talk about a woman's appearance. Like that's not, you know, and I was like, you know. Exactly.
Well, no, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, I think, especially with feminism, because we want to hold ourselves to these standards. We want to be, but then suddenly if somebody does criticize you, you can be like, well, that's very anti-feminist of you. And
and that's something that I feel like it's really important to guard yourself against. Like, it's like, I think that to me, you know, one of the most important things about feminism is that if you treat, if this is the belief that people are equal, you know, and that women deserve respect, then, you know, if you respect someone, you treat them like a person, and their decisions are up for criticism when they should be.
Absolutely. You know, and for the right reasons.
For the right reasons, yeah.
100%. And you talk a lot about kind of the idea of web addiction. Do you think people feel it more or less now, this sort of like obsession with the internet?
Like during coronavirus?
Yeah.
I don't know about you. Have you, like,
I've gone into so many internet holes. I can only speak for myself when I say I've discovered new areas of the internet I did not even know existed.
Same. I mean, you know, like that once a week thing where you get your screen time alert. Like I'm like, please.
I won't look.
It's gone up 800% in the last I'm gonna die.
No, that's why I was so grateful to read your book, because it gave me time away from being on my phone. And I don't know about you, but I'm the kind of person, I think this is like a very millennial thing of like, if I'm watching TV, I'm on my phone too. Yeah. So books are so great for me because it forces me to focus on one thing. That's the only thing.
Yeah, like to me, it's like, it's the only, I'll check my email if I'm reading, if I'm like watching TV. Yeah, it's terrible.
It's
I
awful.
think I think that, well, so the internet, you know, it's designed to make us addicted to it, right? Like like social media companies, you know, Instagram included, they have behavioral psychologists on staff to like the way they can make money is to increase engagement. The way they can increase engagement is to get people sort of cognitively addicted. So, you know, in a lot of ways, it's really like, I mean, we can certainly change the way we interact with these systems, but in a lot of ways, like, I think it's good to just recognize that, you know, that thing where you can't think about anything and you just keep like looking for something new on your phone. Like that's exactly
I mean,
what
that endless like
we're supposed to
refreshing
do.
of the Instagram feed and the thing I think that's crazy about the internet is there is an endless supply of new things to discover. So
And
if
there
you're
always will be.
looking, there
Yeah.
always will be. There always will be. And it's like, how do we determine when to cut ourselves off or when to say this is it? Because you're never going to run out. You know, a book, it ends and that's it, and you put it
Right.
down. But the internet doesn't work like that.
Yeah. I mean, one thing, like, right now, I am more grateful for the internet than usual because it's the only way we have to be with each other, right? Like,
Absolutely.
you know, like FaceTiming my goddamn friends. Like, you know, it's the
I
only
know.
and I have like, you know, I don't know if you felt this, but the internet, like a lot of the really bullshitty behaviors that the internet like encourages, they're kind of being exposed as bullshitty behaviors, you know, like
It's like reshifted our focus, I think, the past month. I feel like, at least from what I've seen, people are really starting to show humanity on the internet, which is
yeah,
amazing.
and people
And
are
like
always
really
trying
supporting
to.
each other.
Yeah, and like for me, like I've been watching a lot of like wildlife cam videos. Like I was watching a bison cam video in Yellowstone National Park today.
Oh.
Like I've been yeah, I've been trying to, like, my internet has gotten a little more, I don't know, but at the same time I'm just like also refreshing like death totals in New York City every second. So
Which
I don't
is
know, but
also, yeah, you need to take a break, I think, from the news.
yeah.
Like I limit my news time to like 20 minutes in the mornings, and then
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that has to be it because
I do that with social media. I have blocker. I have like apps on my phone and on my computer to keep me from, because otherwise, like I have no willpower. Like I just keep
no.
like, you
I
know,
mean, it truly is an addiction, and it's set up
yeah.
to be that way. I have to ask you about your experience being on a teen reality show because I loved reading that. Honestly, probably that was one of my favorites. Just how honest it was, and like your experience doing that. I just want to know like how that was for you.
Well, it was honestly so tight. Like,
It sounded so fun, truly. Like,
yeah, because it was like, you know, okay, so like I'm 16, I'm in Texas. I like was dying to get out of Texas at this point. Like all I wanted, I had gone to this super tiny, like super Christian, super conservative school for my this oh shit. Oh, you back? Okay. Yeah.
it's like, wait, I don't want to miss it.
And it was like suddenly, I mean, I don't know if this is what like modeling gigs felt like to you, but it was like, you know, suddenly just to get to be on your own and get to do, and to like even just like be just, yeah, to be like just totally free for a month. Like I was like, oh, I get to skip school and like go be on an island and do these stupid challenges. And it was honestly the most fun part of it for me was that the camera people were also camera people for The Real World, which was I watched it all the time back then. And so I was just like, tell me, you know, like,
yeah, you're like, tell me everything.
Tell me everything. You know?
Well, there's also such this obsession of like the behind the scenes of everything now.
It's so much more interesting.
Well, yeah, you're like, tell me what's real, what's not. And so you, I think, explaining your experience on that and like what actually happened was so interesting.
And I feel really lucky because I got to be on a really gentle one. Like I think I could have been on a reality TV show where it was, you know, where it was exploitative or, you know, whatever, but I just got to drink pina coladas and like, you know, play around on the beach and, you know, and I didn't get it was this sort of amazing thing also that I was like, I got to have done this incredibly stupid thing, but I never had to watch it. Like I didn't watch it until last year. and it was,
That's also amazing that you didn't watch it, because now I think people are very like, even for me, if I choose something, like I want to see it the second it comes out. And this idea of, you know, even people like Johnny Depp and Leonardo DiCaprio, people like that who could do shows when they were younger to get all this practice, get their, you know, 1,000 hours in without it being all over the internet. You know, even people like my mom who were shooting these things, but it wasn't a constant flow of content from them, and you could kind of like get your time and experience in without it being shown to the world at every step. And so it's
yeah.
cool that you got the experience of having that without it, you know, being all over your friends' Instagrams a week.
Yeah, and there were no camera phones, and the footage wasn't even on YouTube. Like, it really underscored for me, like, how narrowly I had slid in under the wire, where like everything would be recorded and kind of permanent on the internet forever. I was like, ooh, I escaped for like the last, you know, the last gasp of my high school life. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I do think it's super important, you know, when I started working and traveling by myself, there's just certain things that, you know, no matter how much your parents tell you, you have to learn certain things on your own, this like sense of independence. And suddenly when you have to do something, you gain the ability to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned just from traveling by myself. Like there were things I didn't know how to do, but suddenly when you have to do them, you just like realize how strong and capable you actually are. I think that's like so important about traveling when you're young.
Yeah, for
Having
sure.
those experiences. There's a really good quote I wanted to read about, here it is. There is no good answer to being a woman. The art may instead lie in how we refuse the question. I loved that. I love that whole kind of essay about difficult women and how the fact that you can't really be free and good in history as a woman is super true. Where did that kind of come from? Like the idea that you couldn't necessarily be free and have fun and be your own person and also be deemed good by society.
Well, I think so. We're, you know, we're so lucky to be women right now. I mean, it's always like, I think all the time about how, you know, women weren't guaranteed the right to get credit cards by themselves until the 1979 Credit Act. Like,
when I read that, I was shocked, because to me it seems so far removed that a woman didn't have that power.
Yeah, I mean, like spousal rape was legal in so many states, you know, until the 90s. Like the entirety of human history, everything that I've ever wanted to do with my life, such as, you know, be able to be financially independent, to be able to have sex when I wanted to be able to not get pregnant, you know, if I didn't want to, right? Like all these
things that we take for granted now, I think.
They were not accessible to most women for the vast majority of human history.
Absolutely.
And so that's why like the whole body of classical literature is full of women who become adults, and then all of a sudden there's this expectation that, you know, you are secondary, you know, you're literally, I mean, marriage, like the legal doctrine of it was that you and your person and everything you owned were owned by your husband.
Yeah.
Like this was the historical doctrine, right?
All your land belonged to your husband.
And I think, you know, that's not freedom. And there was, but that was what goodness looked like, right? Like being sort of secondary to your male protector.
Yeah.
And one thing I think about is like, I often wonder, I mean, it's something that's really important to me to think about all of the work that women and feminists have done for so long, and all the freedoms that they've given me that they didn't have 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30, let alone 100, and to do as much as I can with them, right? Like it's like, and so the idea of refusing the question is really important to me. Like I, you know, like it's like, I don't have to get married if I don't want to, right? Like I'm pregnant right now. I can give this kid my last name, you know, like things like, I'm not going to answer the question. Like, you know, the idea that someone could ask like, why, you know, why wouldn't you just do the traditional thing or whatever? Like, you don't have to answer that question.
Yeah.
You don't have to, there are so many questions that we have the freedom of not even having, we could answer them if we wanted to, but we don't have to. We can live our own lives. We can make our own money. We can do what we want.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I think it's also interesting when you talk about not wanting to get married and how, you know, you'd go to weddings and everyone would ask you, like, when are you going to get married? Why don't you want to get married? And, you know, that your boyfriend wasn't getting these questions.
Yeah.
Interesting
it's
how
so
they
mad.
ask, how they're like for you, it's so insane that you would, you know, kind of refuse this traditional act of getting married. But when it comes to him, people aren't really begging the same question.
Yeah, there's this way that the wedding has so long been like historically framed for women as like, you know, this is the
best day of your life.
Yeah, and it's like, and I think it's because like, you know, it's really historically the one day where a woman can ask for everything she wants and everyone's like good with it. And then for the rest of her life, people are like, you know, like, right? And to me, I was always like that. And I think another thing that's in the book a lot, another thing that I always think about is the difference between the representation of something and the thing itself, right? Like the representation of a good life on the internet is whatever. Honestly, sometimes it sucks. A good life itself is really important, right? Like the representation of happiness is whatever, but happiness itself is important. And to me, the distance between a wedding and a marriage, right? The representation of commitment and actual commitment, those two things seemed so like distant to me, like to be almost disconnected. And I was just like, what? Like,
like why does that have to be the thing that deems, you know, your relationship committed?
And also just and it's just like they're out of control. Like I've been 50 of them. Like what the fuck?
So many. And I love that you brought up, because you're talking about these like, you know, people getting married and sort of the wedding becoming a bit less traditional. And you actually mentioned my mom, who I always thought had like the best wedding. My parents like didn't wear shoes.
I did. That's right.
Yes, my parents did not wear shoes. My mom was in like a little slip dress.
Great dress.
Great dress. She still has it. I'm going to steal it one day. But you know, I also think that kind of like marked sort of a beginning where you could show your sexuality and, you know, be kind of like this sex symbol and have it still be deemed feminism, whereas in the past those two things didn't go hand in hand. And I think like in the 90s it started to be sort of people were opening up to that idea of that not making you less of a feminist just because you wanted to, you know, be sexy or go against tradition.
And there's so many ways in which like you know, I rag on weddings just because I have spent, you know, so much of my life going to them. But
amount of weddings that you say you've gone to, it's like exhausting.
But you know,
weddings are fun though, I will say.
But they're fun. Like right now, I was like, me and all my friends were like, damn, like all these weddings, like so many of my friends' weddings have gotten canceled in the last like, and all of a sudden I'm like, damn, I wish I could get.
I kind of want to do the electric slide right now.
Like I wish I was around, you know, like I wish I was around all of my friends getting hammered right now in like a formal dress, like it is. And it is nice that a lot of the things that the super traditional kind of, you know, like a lot of my friends have been walked down the aisle by both of their parents, right? Or they've walked themselves down the aisle, or
or with their
the bouquet toss or whatever, and everyone's like, me next, you know.
Which I love, by the way. I think that's one of the funniest wedding
traditions. It's so funny.
Where it's like you catch it and you're like, oh!
And everyone's like, ooh!
I found that to be like in movies, whenever that happened, I always found like the fight for the bouquet to be the most entertaining part of every wedding.
Yeah.
But I mean, no, the idea that also like all these weddings are being canceled now and like Zoom meetings, things like that, for me, it makes me feel old, and I know that I should be the one who knows how to do all of these things, but like relearning how to function in life. Like I think that's why reading this book was so wonderful to me, because it was written at a time when the world wasn't like this. And so it's like a refreshing way to be like, all right, the world will go back to this one day, and we do have a world that functions. It might not be perfect, but you know, in a way that hopefully we can all get back to someday.
Yeah. I know, I keep being like, all I want to do is go out dancing, and then I keep being like, wait, will I be like scared?
Well, no, and you wonder like, when am I gonna hug people again? I think it's gonna be a long time, and I think we're gonna all have to kind of relearn these fundamental things that we built our beliefs off of. And you talk a lot about self-expression, what the internet has become, and like how it's kind of morphed into this popularity contest a bit. And there's a quote that you say, where we had once been free to be ourselves online, we were now chained to ourselves online, and this made us self-conscious. I think this idea of kind of like the persona that you create online suddenly you feel like trapped by, because again, like you said earlier, you can't go back on things that you said because there's a permanent record of them now, and you have to kind of like really stick by your beliefs now. Have you felt like, you know, being a part of social media for so long that you feel like the persona that you've created, do you ever feel a little bit chained to or tied to?
I the answer is no, but it's because I think about this stuff so much. You know, I think like maybe one of the reasons I write about this stuff is so that I can make sure that my relationship to this thing that we're all going to be tied to, you know, possibly forever, is kind of as healthy a one as it can be.
Absolutely.
You know, like I think to me, one of the things I always just think about is like there are two things that I always remind myself of. Like, I care a lot about what my friends think about me, you know, and what my like coworkers think about me.
People
But
who know you know
yeah,
you.
but
Yeah.
like, but strangers, I don't give a shit, you know?
Absolutely.
And
that's so important, by the way.
yeah, and it's like, because I've like, I try to remember that like people who I don't know, their opinion of me is not really my business, you know? Like it's not actually really my business. And
Yeah.
you know, and there's also, to me, it's like, the way that you stay free. I mean, I have like gotten overwhelmed with this. Like the period of like book self-promotion was very dizzying for me. Like I was at a book club and doing a Q&A, and a girl asked me, she was like, so what would be your strategies for other people who want to cultivate a relatable personal brand? And I was like, like
basically being like, how do I tell me exactly what to do to be authentic?
Yeah. They said authentic, not relatable. And I was just like, I have to die now. But I think like for me, it's like, as real life is always like, real life is the important thing, right? Like embodied presence is the most important thing. Like the internet can never be more important than your actual life. You know, the representation of your life is so unimportant. Your actual life is really important, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, like, to me, that's so clear, you know, like actual life, actual relationships are so much more central, that like whatever kind of the version of me that exists on the internet, I also want it to be not much better or worse than me.
Yeah.
Like, I want it to be kind of like me, which is its own like fucked up desire, I think, but it's like the one that I have. But it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, who cares?
Absolutely. And like for me, someone who doesn't know me, I have to like stop myself from being offended. Whereas like if you meet me and have a conversation with me and then you leave and you're like, yeah, I don't like that girl, I will be offended and I will be hurt.
Yeah.
But if you just see my Instagram or whatever and you decide you don't like me, I try to not take that personally, and I'm like, that's
it's nothing to do with you. It's just
your
like,
business.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think now, you know, when we are stripped of most of our real lives and our human interaction and all we're left with is the internet, it does, I think it's showing, at least me and a lot of us, how important our real life is, and like those human interactions, that human connection.
Yeah, and it shows the way it's like the internet is always at best, it's like a shadow of, I mean, like I'm so thankful for things like FaceTime and for, you know, being able to have conversations. It's like, it's literally an emotional lifeline. But as we all know, it is not a replacement from just actually sitting with somebody,
being with someone,
and being with them. And I think, I think this has been a really, really clear reminder of that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on here. This is like the coolest thing ever. I'm truly, like, I tell everyone, the only people I fangirl in front of are writers and authors, because I admire it so much. Because the idea of sitting down and writing an entire book is so intimidating to me, but I will read all of them. So if you ever write anything else, please send it to me.
Well, thank you for doing Quarantine Book Club. I'm excited to see what you pick up.
Always. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Enjoy. All right, guys. Oh, that was such a great conversation. If you haven't read Jia's book, please read it. I found myself audibly stopping and saying things to myself like, wow, or, oh, that was so true. She's truly so smart and so cool to read something, you know, a sort of philosophy that's super modern. People actually say, I pulled a quote that people talk about Gia. They say she's one of the only writers right now who can incorporate meme speak into her prose without losing face. And it's very much so a sign of the times. And it's a really big compliment, I think, for someone to get, and she deserves all of the praise. Please read Trick Mirror. And I will announce the book for next week very soon, which I'm very excited about because it's another book I haven't read. So we're really doing this all together. I hope everyone has a really good rest of their Friday, wherever they are in the world. And thanks for tuning in again. Bye, guys.